Good morning.
Good morning.
That was good morning.
Good morning.
So much of faith at times is simply hanging on. It's the whole idea that we grasp on to something even in the face of difficulty, uncertainty, doubt, disdain, and we don't let go. The psalm reading this morning was saying that God will not slumber and will not let your foot get moved back, which is reassuring because sometimes we're often told just one foot in front of the other, but there are times in our lives when we can't even put one foot in front of the other. And the promise at least that God will be with us and help us not to slide back is huge, because all we can do is stand still. We can't move forward, and everything in us it takes is simply not to be pushed back. Jacob is preparing to meet his brother. Jacob, I'm sure you do remember, but to recap, Jacob steals the birthright from his older brother Esau. Esau is this big, hulking, hunting sort of, and Jacob is the evidently more timid, but perhaps wiser brother. So he steals the birthright and then takes off. And his brother is quite upset. And Jacob spends years trying to win one wife, but then winning another wife. He's been gone a long time. He's coming back. He's successful now. He has wives, he has maids, he has lots of children, he has livestock, and he's going to meet Esau. And Esau is there with his men and his wealth, and Jacob is scared. And Jacob sends everything, across the river and is there by himself to kind of prepare himself when suddenly out of nowhere a man appears and they wrestle. Don't know what, maybe that's where this man always liked to spend the evening. We have no idea what started the fight. But they fought. And they fought all night long. Now, if you can imagine how long the night is at times when you wake up in the middle of the night and you look and you go, oh man, it's 4 hours before I have to get up, and it seems like the night just stretches on and on. Imagine how long the night is when you are wrestling with someone. And so they wrestle. And Jacob cannot defeat his opponent. But his opponent can't defeat Jacob either. And they go back and forth, and finally the opponent, whose name we do not know, touches Jacob's hip and it goes out of joint. So now Jacob can't even really stand properly. Now he's grappling and holding on. And then come daybreak, or as daybreak starts to approach, this unknown assailant says, let me go. It's going to be morning soon. And Jacob's like, I'm not letting you go unless you bless me. It's almost like, two kids wrestling and saying, no, you got to say uncle. Jacob will not let go. He can't win, but he's not going to let go. And so then the unnamed assailant says, all right, I'll bless you. What's your name? And he says, Jacob. And he says, I will now call you Israel, for you have fought with the world and with God and have survived. And Jacob lets go, and the assailant leaves, and then Jacob calls the place Peniel, which is, I have seen God face to face and have survived. This is one of those texts that you start to read about, and there's just so much commentary on who the assailant is, because it isn't necessarily clear. Some people, there are some writers who say it was a demon, and that's why the demon had to leave before daybreak. Others that, it's a God representative, but if it was God, God would know the name, and God would not be fought to a draw. It's unclear. And it's, I think, supposed to be unclear. Because there are times in our lives when we strive and we fight against the world, and at times it feels like not only are we fighting against the world, we are also fighting against God. That we are struggling against our very existence, and everything that we are facing feels like it's not just the if it's the town council or your neighbor or your family, but it feels like it's the world that has piled up against you. It feels as if it is God who is against you. And all Jacob can do is hang on. But in the end, that was all that was required of him. He wasn't required to win. He was just required not to let go, to hold fast, even as it felt like it would never end, even as he knew he could not prevail, even as it damaged him to a point where he would walk the rest of his life with a limp. Still, with all of that, all he had to do was to let go, or was to not let go, and that took everything that he had to do it. Our struggles that we have in our life. There are times when life seems to be flowing along, but there are other times when we are struggling. And like Jacob, it's all we can do not to let go. We hold on with everything, and the struggle comes with a price. Like Jacob, who left that struggle limping the rest of his life, we will go through things in our lives that will mar us, scar us, change us. And we can use sometimes those changes to better us, but other times those changes will just simply be changes, and we will not be what we once were. But what we're asked to do is not win, but to not let go. And this again comes back to that psalm where we have a God who will be with us. Not let us move back, not necessarily push us forward, but will be with us in that struggle, to hold on. So much of faith isn't always about the triumphant sort of I believed and everything went my way, as much as it's I believed and I held fast to that belief. And in the end, Jacob triumphs. They call it a crippling victory. But he comes out ahead. He gets the blessing, not because he won, but because he did not give up. And sometimes that's all we can do, is not give up. But not giving up isn't always easy. And it takes a perseverance, an endurance, and a strength that sometimes seems beyond us. The passage in the gospel reading, the old woman and the judge. The judge is positioned as someone who is powerful. He is fearless. He doesn't care what people think about him. He has his position. He's untouchable. He doesn't care about God. He believes completely in himself, and that is good enough for him. And so he does whatever he wants. And this old woman, this widow, and so, you're talking about the top of the social stratosphere, and then you're talking about an old widow who's probably down here, and she's being oppressed by others. And so it's an unfair battle. She cannot win. She cannot force this judge to do anything that the judge does not want to. She has no leverage. The only thing that she has is perseverance. And wow, what a difference that makes. Because she does not give up. She does not let go. And she keeps coming to this judge, and we can only imagine how many times, in the parable, I want justice. I want justice. I want justice. And the judge, get lost, beat it, go somewhere else. I'll sick my dogs on you. I'll do something. And she just, I want justice. I want justice. I want justice. So the only power she has is to ask. And so she asks over and over and over again. And finally the judge says, you know what? I am helpless before this. I am helpless before this perseverance that keeps coming to me. She is going to wear me down. I will give her justice. Not because I believe in justice, not because I am fearful. I am just worn down. And this is the example that Jesus uses for us in our prayer life and in our faith. Sometimes it's the only thing that we have, is just not to stop trying, to knock on that door. I want, and it seems selfish, but and we have to check ourselves. What are we asking for? Are we asking for something that's about us, or are we asking for justice? Are we holding on to something so that we are not pushed back, or are we, our motivations, our ethical approach to it is important, but that isn't actually what Jesus is talking about here. What Jesus is talking about is the perseverance to hold to that which you believe. And in the end, it isn't even so much about changing the world as much as not allowing the world to change you. How easy would it have been for the widow to say, you know what? I've asked. They've said no, I give up. And instead of being this person who will not give up and who will constantly fight for justice, she allows the resistance of the world to change her. And she says, you know what, it's not worth it. But she doesn't. Because even as she is losing time and time again, because every time he says no, she's lost. Even as she is losing time and time again, she does not let go. She does not give up. She does not allow the indifference of the world, the disdain of the world, the bitterness of the world to beat her down. And that's amazing. Because sometimes when we look at our world, it is easy to feel like just, what difference can it make? I give up. What can I do? It doesn't make a difference. It does not matter. It will never change. Why do I bother? These are things that we can say over and over again with history telling us, yeah, that's the way it is. And we'll allow the world to change us. We'll allow the world to shape and take away our faith. Or we can be like the widow and hold on even when it doesn't make sense. Sometimes our faith is more about being faithful in the face of failure than it is about overcoming that failure. It's being faithful even as we are feeling like we are not only not gaining, that we're losing, but we hold on. Samuel was well known in the community he grew up with. Samuel was that kid that when something went wrong, all the neighbors looked at Samuel. Because chances are 9 out of 10 times it was Samuel. A bike went missing? It was in Samuel's yard. A window broken? Samuel was around there. Samuel, firecrackers off at 3 a.m., it was Samuel. The whole community knew it was Samuel. And Samuel could have felt offended that everyone always thought that when something went wrong, it was his fault. Except it was his fault. It's how he was living his life. And no one despised him more than his next door neighbor, Mrs. Kalowski. And Mrs. Kalowski had lots and lots of reasons to despise him. He broke 3 of her windows. One with a baseball by accident, one with a BB gun on purpose, and the third time with a weird slingshot contraption that he had made that no one believed him, but was an accident because he was actually aiming for his other neighbor's window and it just misfired and hit her window. He's the one who attached firecrackers to her cat's tail that scared the cat so much it didn't come back for 3 weeks. Samuel tormented this poor woman, and she despised Samuel. She had a daughter the same age as Samuel, but it was the only time she ever gave her son, who was a few years older than Samuel, permission to beat up Samuel if he was ever seen in the presence of her daughter. And that was made very clear to Samuel. And even though he liked the sister, he was scared of the brother, so that was the one line he would not cross. But Samuel, the momentum he gained in his childhood as he grew up went with him in his life. And so no one was more unsurprised than Mrs. Kalowski when Samuel ended up in jail. And he served 10 years. And Mrs. Kalowski spent those 10 years saying, "I told you so," to anyone who would listen. I knew it all along. The only sad part she felt was that he only got 10 years. But Samuel, when he was in prison, something changed. Both of his parents died while he was serving time. And that was the catalyst that made him look at who he was. And so he started to take on jobs in the prison. He became the apprentice to the plumber. And if you think about it, in any prison, there could be up to 500-600 toilets. And every day, some of those toilets are going to be clogged. And Samuel was the best and the fastest unclogger of toilets that the institution had ever seen. And he started to take a sense of responsibility for who he was. But because of his earlier stay, before he had started to change, he stayed out his whole time in the prison, so that when he got out, he wasn't allowed to go to a halfway house. He had to go to a residence, and the only residence available to him that he could move to was his parents' house, because that was in his name. And he was incredibly fearful of moving back to his old community where everyone knew him and everyone would judge him. And everyone would say, "Ha, you haven't changed." But he had no choice, and he got a job with a local plumber through a connection in the prison. So he had a job and he had a place to stay. And even though he knew there would be resistance, he was determined to show the people that he was different. But if there was one person that was more upset about Samuel about moving to his own community, it was his now new neighbor, Mrs. Kalowski. And at first, Samuel would go around the community and he met people and he'd say, "Hi, my name's Samuel." And they'd be like, "Oh, so nice to meet you," because a lot of the neighborhood had changed and he was friendly. But then after about 2 days, he realized people were no longer smiling at him or waving at him when he waved. And it's because Mrs. Kalowski went down the street, both sides, knocking on the door and saying, "Do you know who that is?" and told everyone that he was a criminal. But Samuel was determined. And he went to his parole officer and he said, "Look, how do I tell them that I'm changed?" And the parole officer laughed and says, "You can't tell them. Your words have no meaning. You have lied most of your life. And so now when you start to speak, and even if you are telling the truth, which I believe you are, no one will believe you. The only way you will convince them is by living a life that gives weight to your words." So Samuel started to do as much as he could for the community, and particularly for his neighbor. And then one morning, he woke up and there was snow on the ground, and so he shoveled his driveway. He shoveled the sidewalk, even though he didn't need to, in front of his property. He shoveled the sidewalk in front of Mrs. Kalowski's house, and then he decided, I'm going to shovel her driveway. And he was about halfway through the driveway when a police car pulled up. And Mrs. Kalowski had called the police and said he was trespassing, even as he was shoveling her driveway. And lo and behold, the officer that came out was none other than Mrs. Kalowski's son, who is now a police officer. And he comes out and he says, "Look, Sam, you've been charged with trespassing." And Mrs. Kalowski came out and yelled, "There's a criminal on my yard." And her son says, "I know, Mom, I'm dealing with it." She goes, "He's shoveling my snow." And he goes, "Yeah, Mom, I'm talking to him." She goes, "But he wouldn't have to if I had a son that actually cared about me." And he goes, "Mom," goes, "No, I'm serious. I have to have a bank robber come and shovel my snow because I have a son who's a police officer who completely ignores me and puts other things." Mom. And then he finally looked at Sam. He said, just go. It's okay. I'll deal with this." And so Samuel wasn't charged for trespassing, and Mrs. Kalowski's son got a nice 45-minute lecture. But after that, he decided that he would not give up. And so every snowfall, he continued to shovel his driveway, the sidewalk in front of her, because that was public. And as much as he could get the snow while not standing on her property. And she would glare at him to make sure, but he would shovel as much as he could. And when the plow comes through and it builds, he would clear that for her. He tried to make it as easy as possible. And then in the fall, when winter came, he would rake the leaves as much as he could on the edge. And when her garbage cans got blown across the street, he would pick them up and he would bring them back. He would put them just on the, he did all these little things. And he did it for 2 years. And on the third year, where he was just constantly getting yelled at by Mrs. Kalowski and glared at, and he was still doing it, finally one early winter, you know the heavy snow when it's all wet? And it's like a shovelful feels like 50 pounds. Well, he did his driveway, he did the sidewalk, he did her sidewalk, and she saw it, and he started to do the edges, and she came out with her shovel, and she looked at him, and she said, well, if you're gonna do my driveway, do a good job, and know that I'm not paying you because you still owe me for all a life of torment and pain and broken windows. And Samuel said, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to shovel your driveway. And of course you wouldn't pay me. I am honored to have the privilege of shoveling your driveway. And he did. And after that, the next 2 times he did his and then he did hers, but she came out and yelled at him because he was doing his first and she might have an appointment. She never did. So after that, every morning he got up, even when he had to go to work, and he shoveled her driveway and then his. He did her leaves and then his. He took out her garbage. He did everything that he could. And this wasn't just once or twice, this was year on year. And Mrs. Kalowski, yeah, she would put the Mount Rushmore faces to shame because her stony face never ever changed. She just glared at him every single time. And Samuel was like, okay. And then one day he knew he was finally getting through to her when she actually invited him into his house, into her house, because she had heard that he was now a plumber and was really good with clogged toilets, and she had been cleaning out her kitty litter, and the whole thing had dumped into her toilet, and it was the absorbent type, and so it took him 3 hours to clear her toilet. And the whole time she's saying, I'm not paying you for this. She goes, no, I would refuse payment. Well, you can't refuse it because I'm not giving it. She goes, I'm just happy to help. She goes, you should be overjoyed to help me. But he just kept at it. She was the angriest person he'd ever met. And that was 10 years in prison as well. But he didn't stop doing what he thought was right. He didn't give up. He wasn't going to make any grounds with this woman. He was never going to change this woman. But he wasn't going to let her change him either. And so he kept working. About a year later, Mrs. Kalowski died. And he went to the funeral, and he saw, as he was there, he saw the son, and the son kind of appreciated the fact that he had been shoveling his mom's driveway and raking his leaves because he didn't have to. And they'd become friends, actually. And he saw the sister there, and he didn't dare go close to the sister because he was still kind of worried about the brother, but the brother just laughed at him. But the sister approached him, and she said, Samuel, I just want to ask you how you did it. He said, did what? She goes, you've known my mother. I've known my mother my whole life. My mother is the most stubborn person in this world. But you changed her opinion on me. He goes, no, I didn't. She yelled at me every single day. He goes, no, you changed her opinion of you. To the point of when I got divorced, after a year, because she said I had to wait a year before I would see anyone else, because that's only proper. But after a year, she started to say, well, you know, Samuel is eligible, and he's a plumber, and he's making a good wage, and he shovels my driveway, unlike my son. She goes, I could not believe that my mother would say something nice about you, even saying that I should go out with you. And he says, well, that's not a bad idea. She goes, but how did you change her mind? And he says, I never tried to change her mind. I just tried to not let her change me. The whole world at times may seem like Mrs. Kalowski. We will get yelled at, we will get belittled, we will get dismissed, we will do the things that we're supposed to do, and the world will treat it like, yeah, we should have been doing that all along without any sort of gratitude. So be it. Because what we are called to do is to hold on to the faith that we have. Sometimes holding on is all we can do. But that is what we do then. We're not going to win. We're not going to defeat it. We're not going to overturn it. we don't let go. I think it was this week or last week, Pam had said she was talking to someone in the hospital, and they had gone to a church somewhere, and she had said that the person had mentioned to them that, that the church, and I don't know the details, but basically she said the church wasn't very peace oriented. She goes, why can't there be churches that are about peace? And Pam said, you should tell people that you're a peace church. And maybe we should. But being a peace church has never felt easy. Being a peace, people who speak peace, because the world will tell you being a pacifist is like one of the most idiotic things we can do, because how are you going to change the world if you're not going to beat the world up? How are you going to change people if you don't force them? How can you change people by being a pacifist? It's ineffective. It's not the most best use of our time. But we're not a peace church because we think somehow we will bend the world to our will. We don't practice peace thinking that somehow suddenly everyone else will say, yeah, that makes sense. We practice peace because we believe. We believe in that whole love your enemy. We believe in that whole everyone deserves a chance, and that we are called to be the examples of God's compassion and grace. Now, being a peace church is not being a soft church, as some people think, or a church that stands off at the side. We are supposed to be the voice of justice, or for justice, for righteousness. We aren't quiet. We don't stand in the background. We stay firm to that. But even in the face of all that the world will throw at us, even when it feels like we can sing till we're blue and no one will listen, we keep singing. Because it's not about the effect that we're having on the world. It's about our call to be faithful to the calling of God, to trust that God is using us even when we can't see it, to trust that God is using us to move this world when it feels like the world is going in the opposite direction, to trust that if we hold on, there will be a blessing. Or we might get bent all out of shape, we might not be able to walk properly, we might get thrown in the corner, but we will hold on, and in that holding on there is a blessing. That in our perseverance, it's easy to say when you get the results. It's easy to hold on when morning comes. It's easy to persist when the justice is finally given. But the majority of the time, you're holding on, it's still night, and it feels like the dawn will never come. The majority of time when you're knocking on that door and saying, I want justice, the answer is no. The majority of time we strive to be faithful, it will feel like the world dismisses us and throws us aside. But that is not the reason why we stop. We keep holding on. We keep knocking. We keep presenting ourselves because this is who we've been called to be. Children of God that people might think are soft or easy, but we don't give up, or we try very hard not to. I know that I was thinking about this, and then Murray just showed me an announcement, and I will share it during the prayer time. There are times when people feel completely overwhelmed. There are times when people say, I can't do anymore, and I am not casting judgment on that. I am simply saying that we have to dig deep. And even if other people are starting to let their hands slip, we hold on to them as we're holding on to whatever it is we're holding on to. We can't do this on our own. It's incredibly difficult. It's difficult to do this as a community, but that's the gift we've been given. That we don't do this as individuals. We have decided who we are going to be, faithful to God, and in so being, We know our path. And if the world rises up against us, we will not waver.